Hello, I'm Claire. It is 5:47 a.m. The sun hasn't even considered touching the glass of the skyscrapers in lower Manhattan, but you are already here. You are 23 years old, sitting in a task chair that costs more than your first car, staring at 3 monitors that bleed cold blue light into your tired eyes. Your coffee is lukewarm, a bitter reminder of a morning that started 3 hours ago. On your desk sits a stack of pitch decks that, in all likelihood, no one will ever actually read, but they have to be perfect. Every margin, every font size, every footnote must be beyond reproach. You have $94,000 in student debt hanging over your head like a low ceiling. When you signed your contract, your salary felt like a king's ransom. Then you saw what your managing director made on a single closing last Tuesday. And suddenly, you realized you aren't even on the scoreboard yet. This is the reality of the entry level. This is where the machine begins to process you. You don't complain because complaining is a luxury for people who aren't replaceable. Instead, you run the numbers. You format the models until your fingers move by muscle memory. You learn the dark art of the 10K, training your brain to dissect a 100-page regulatory filing in 40 minutes flat, hunting for the one-line item that explains a dip in operating cash flow. This isn't just work, it is survival. In this environment, your only currency is your precision and your silence. Then, one morning, in the quiet gray hours before the senior associates arrive, you find it. It is a tiny cell in a massive Excel workbook, a formula error buried deep within a senior associate's valuation model. You trace the logic, your heart hammering against your ribs. It's an error worth $2 million. You look at the screen, then at the empty hallway. You don't run to your boss. You don't play the hero. You quietly fix it in your own version of the file, and you say nothing. You've already realized that the system doesn't reward honesty or the pointing out of flaws in the hierarchy. It rewards discretion. It rewards the ability to make the machine run smoothly without friction. Your days aren't measured in hours anymore. They are measured in endurance. 14 hours is a short day. 18 hours is standard. After the first month, you stop counting. You start observing. And you watch which managing director commands the room with a whisper and which ones are avoided like a contagion. You don't have power yet, not even a shred of it, but you're learning exactly where it lives and how it breathes. From a spreadsheet on the 31st floor, you process a $430 million deal. You will never meet the client. You will never see the mahogany table in the boardroom where the final handshakes happen. But your numbers are in that room. Your labor is the invisible ink in that pitch deck. As you look out at the city lights at 2 a.m., the floor empty and the air conditioning humming a lonely tune, you start to understand the geometry of this world. You are the foundation. You are the part nobody sees and nobody acknowledges. But without you, wall, the entire structure would collapse into the street. For the first time, you aren't thinking about the salary. You're thinking about the architecture of the game itself. 2 years pass. The debt is smaller, the suits are better, and the exhaustion has become a permanent resident in your bones. You are no longer an analyst. You are an associate. You find yourself in the room, not the main room where the principals sit, but the side room, the one where the juniors wait with their laptops open, ready to pull a data point out of thin air if a question arises. But you are there. That is the shift. You aren't just formatting now, you are structuring. You are drafting the terms on a $180 million mezzanine financing deal. For the first time, you sit across from a CFO. When he asks about a potential covenant breach, you don't flinch. You explain the scenario with a calm clinical detachment because you've run that specific model 40 times in the last week. You know the breaking point of his company better than he does. This is your new currency, preparation. The deal on the table is a leveraged buyout of a regional logistics company in the Midwest. You know, looking at the projections, that the only way to hit the required internal rate of return is through aggressive operational cuts. You don't model the human cost. You don't model the families in Ohio whose lives will be upended when the local distribution center is shuttered to save 6 basis points on the margin. Nobody asked you to. Your job is to model EBITDA margins and debt service coverage. You present the data cleanly, devoid of sentiment. The deal moves forward. You collect your bonus, a number that would have seemed impossible 2 years ago. You don't think about Ohio. You rationalize it the way everyone in the building does. You just ran the numbers. You didn't make the world. You just calculated its trajectory. This brings you to the second rule of the machine. Proximity to capital is proximity to power. And proximity to power means proximity to decisions you'd rather not have made. You begin building your own network of loyalty. It isn't based on friendship. It's based on mutual utility. A VP who pulls you onto high-profile deals. An associate who feeds you internal intelligence before it hits the memo. This is the first layer of the machine inside the machine. Now, you are the one managing the souls. You have a team of 4 analysts and 2 associates. You've stopped counting your own hours because your life has become the job. You no longer think in tasks. You think in deal flow. The velocity of capital is the pulse of your existence. You close your first transaction independently, a $620 million acquisition financing for European infrastructure assets in Southeast Asia. On the cover sheet, your managing director's name is in bold. Your name is tucked away on page 6. But in the room, something has changed. The client is looking at you. When the numbers get complicated, when the hedging strategy needs explaining, they don't look at the MD. They look at the person who actually built the logic. You. This is the shift at the vice president level. You are no longer the support staff. You are a dealer. You start to see the ethical architecture of high finance with terrifying clarity. You're working on a deal where the target company's pension obligations are being restructured post-close. The acquiring private equity fund needs a 22% IRR to justify the risk. The only way to get there is by shaving the pension fund. You know exactly what that means for the retirees who spent 30 years on the factory floor. You know it means a lower quality of life for thousands of people you will never meet. You don't say it. No one says it. In the meeting, the talk is of optimizing the balance sheet and streamlining legacy liabilities. The language is a sterile barrier against the reality of the consequences. The deal closes in 11 weeks. Your year-end cut is $480,000, or you wire $40,000 to your parents to pay off their mortgage. You buy a 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood where 2-bedroom is a code for having arrived. You tell yourself the pension fund was already insolvent, that you actually saved the company from total liquidation. You might even be right, but deep down, you know the third rule of the VP level. You stop asking if the deal is good. You only ask if the deal is executable. As you move toward the director level, your role shifts again. You aren't just executing deals, you are sourcing them. You are the one originating the flow. Clients don't call the bank anymore, they call your personal cell. Private equity shops route their most sensitive mandates through you because you have a reputation for being a ghost. 3 closings in 4 years, 0 leaks. I never missed a deadline. In a world of loud egos, your silence and reliability are worth more than a genius-level IQ. You manage a $1.2 billion book of advisory mandates. When you sit in a pitch, you are the senior presence. Your associate runs the Excel, your VP coordinates the due diligence, and you sell the vision. You are no longer selling financial models. You are selling confidence. You are the insurance policy for the client's career. At this stage, you begin to understand leverage in its purest form. It's not about debt-to-equity ratios. It's about informational leverage, the knowing. You know which multinational is about to initiate a strategic review before the board even votes on it. And you know which sovereign wealth fund is quietly building a position in a distressed utility before any public disclosure is triggered. You don't trade on this information. That's for the amateurs who end up in federal prison. You use the knowing to be sharper, more decisive. You use it to position your clients and your firm, but then you lose one. It's a $2.8 billion mandate that you should have won on the merits. Your numbers were better. Your fee structure was more competitive, but you lost it because a competing managing director belonged to the same private golf club as the chairman of the target company. You don't lose your composure. You don't complain about the unfairness of the world. You simply join 2 exclusive clubs within the month. You've learned the 4th rule. At the director level, the deal is never just about the numbers. The numbers are just the entry fee. The deal is about the ecosystem. The calls start coming earlier now, often before the markets even open. Sometimes they come from private numbers you don't recognize. You manage 12 core client relationships, each representing tens of millions in annual fee revenue. You realize, with a jolt of clarity, that you are no longer working for the bank. You are the bank's relationship with these clients. If you left tomorrow, the revenue would follow you. This is a subtle but seismic distinction. You sit on an internal credit committee now. A $900 million revolving credit facility is on the table for a long-term client with a deteriorating balance sheet. Purely on the numbers, it's a no. But you vote yes. You vote yes because losing that relationship would cost the firm 3 times the exposure in lost future fees. It is a political decision disguised as a financial one. You realize that every major decision at the top of the pyramid is exactly this. Your life is a blur of high-altitude travel. Singapore, Zurich, Abu Dhabi, London. You have dinners with ministers, not the ones who show up on the news, but the ones who actually control the state's coffers. These aren't business dinners in the traditional sense. There are no pitch decks. They are relationship maintenance. You've realized that capital doesn't follow returns alone. Capital is a shy animal. It follows relationships, political alignment, and regulatory familiarity. It follows the trust between the right people in the right rooms. The best trade in the world doesn't execute without that invisible thread of trust. Your identity has quietly restructured itself around the needs of the machine. You didn't notice it happening? No one does. Your hobbies, your social circle, the way you speak, everything has been optimized for the flow of capital. Finally, you reach the inner sanctum. There are 14 partners in your division. You are one of them. Your name isn't on the door, but it's in the documents that matter. You have carried interest in the fund. You have skin in every major deal the firm runs. When the fund performs, your personal net worth rockets. When it doesn't, you feel the burn. This changes your psychology entirely. You stop optimizing for the annual bonus cycle. You start optimizing for 5-year fund cycles. You stop thinking in quarters and start thinking in decades. You lead a $4.3 billion acquisition of a European energy infrastructure company. It's a monster of a deal. 4 regulatory jurisdictions, 3 months of brutal negotiations, 2 competing hostile bids. You run the consortium, your fund, a Middle Eastern sovereign co-investor, and a Canadian pension fund. The closing dinner is in a private room in London that doesn't appear on any floor plan. You structure the offshore holding through a Luxembourg vehicle feeding into a Cayman feeder fund. The tax efficiency is substantial, and every inch of it is legal, blessed by high-priced attorneys in Dublin and Singapore. You sign the documents without a second thought. The deal adds 180 basis points to the fund's net IRR. Your personal carry on this single transaction will compound to over $40 million. You notice that you've stopped attending most social events. It's not because you're too busy. At this level, you have people to handle your schedule. It's because the conversations aren't useful anymore. Your social world has narrowed to the few hundred people globally who control the majority of the world's liquid capital. Today, you take 2 calls. One is from a sovereign wealth fund in the Gulf with $7 billion seeking deployment. They want you to anchor their deal flow. The second call is from a finance minister. You take both calls from the same room on the 44th floor. There are no trading screens here, no Bloomberg terminals, just floor-to-ceiling glass, absolute silence, and a phone that connects you to the people who move entire asset classes. You are no longer in the market is in you. Your sentiment, your positioning, and your deployment decisions move price discovery. When you buy, the world watches. When you pull back, analysts spend weeks trying to figure out why. You sit on corporate boards, you advise multilateral development banks, you brief governments on capital market conditions. You don't lobby, you advise. The distinction is real, but the influence is identical. At 71 years old, you have been inside the machine for 47 years. You don't carry a formal title anymore. Your business card just has your name. You have stakes in 5 different funds, 2 private banks, and a reinsurance vehicle in Bermuda. 3 central bank governors know you by your first name. Now, this isn't because you influence monetary policy directly, but because the information flows in both directions. You see the liquidity stress in a currency block 2 years before the rest of the world does. You structure your positions accordingly, not to trigger a crisis, but to be on the right side of history when it inevitably arrives. The press calls it prescient risk management. You know it's just the result of being the person the information flows toward. But there is a cost. The people you truly trust can be counted on one hand. Beyond that small circle, there is nothing but utility. You have more access than anyone in your life can possibly comprehend, and yet you have almost no one you can tell the truth to. You are too embedded to ever be removed. If you were to disappear, the system would face a shock it might not recover from. That isn't power in the way people usually think of it. It's something quieter, colder, and more permanent. You sit in a boardroom in Geneva. 4 people, no agenda, no screen. You speak for 6 minutes. The room is so quiet you can hear the ticking of a clock that costs more than a house. When you stop speaking, the room moves. The capital moves. Somewhere in another glass tower, a 23-year-old kid is staring at a terminal for the first time. His badge says, Analyst first year. He thinks this is about the salary. He thinks the system rewards hard work and honesty. He doesn't know yet what the machine actually rewards, but he will. The terminal blinks, the market opens, and the machine takes another step forward, exactly as you designed it. I'm Claire, and this is the anatomy of the machine.